Hi, this is Pat Moorhead, and we'd like to welcome you to day one of the 6.5 Summit. I'm here with my co-host, Daniel Newman, and we are just stoked to get started here. Dan, how you doing?
Yeah, day one of the Summit's always very, very exciting. We have a great show, great week. What is this, day one of three, fourth Summit, Pat? Can you believe it? Can you believe in 2020 when we kicked this thing off in the middle of all the chaos?
Yeah, it was incredible. And if I look at the themes that we talked about, they've changed. And this year's theme is essentially practical innovation for kind of troubled times or rough waters, right? But one thing has been consistent, and that is doubling down on innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, during times when we have a bit of austerity in the economy, technology is one of those forcing functions that helps companies and helps the economy drive forward and drive through. And we're seeing so much of that. And we're in obviously this huge inflection, Pat. Everything that's going on with AI. We are seeing companies trying to find that right balance of how do we move forward with automation. And of course, throughout all this, we need connectivity.
Yeah. Well, I'm pleased to introduce Nicholas Heuveldop. Good to see you.
Great to be back with you guys.
Talking about innovation, welcome back to the 6.5 Summit. Good to see you.
Great to have you guys here.
Yeah.
Great to be back.
It is always great when someone like Nicholas comes back. And even year to year, you kind of think about last year, some of the things we were talking about. We talked a little bit about the metaverse, Nicholas. We're going to have a little different conversation this year.
We were on the factory floor too.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, it was great, the factory tour. And here we are. You can probably see if you're watching this at home. The backdrop is beautiful New York City. And just how vibrant it is here.
Yeah.
And it is. I mean, the energy is really high. But, Nicholas, with all that in mind, we are still in this point where, if you're listening to the news cycles, you're hearing a lot about, are we going to be in a recession? What's going on in the market, in the economy? You got rifts. You got companies, reducing force. You've got other companies announcing that they're going to look to AI to replace certain subsets of jobs. I'd love to just start off, with you as a big opening session here at the Summit, talking about kind of your perspective of what's going on in the macro economy.
Well, if you look at it globally, there is a lot of uncertainty. We see it playing out in different geographies, but I think it's fair to say that you have uncertainty all over. Inflation continues persistently at high levels. Businesses that are capital intensive, of course, suffering from high interest rates. We see Europe now also with the energy crisis, probably EU, UK, probably more on a path for recession. See a lot of concerned customers. If you look at the Middle East, India, not so much. I think they seem to be coping with it better than the US. I mean, we still bet on the US of kind of plowing through this. I mean, there is a lot of underlying strength, but also uncertainties here. And we hear that from our customers as well now. Now, if you look at our industry as such, and we're typically a bit more resilient, and we don't follow kind of the macroeconomic trends necessarily. Investments and your monthly telecom bill, your mobile broadband subscription is not one of the first things you compromise with. We see that. I mean, there's a lot of other things that go first. So that has typically not been as sensitive to the pressures. But we see customers kind of also preparing for a little bit of a slowdown. So we see some hesitation. But still, again, the bad debt is not like it is in other sectors. It's significantly lower. So we'll see. But then, of course, you have the geopolitical aspect as well. War in Russia. I mean, I'm originally from Europe.
Right.
We have war going on in Europe right now. Of course, that creates a lot of uncertainty. Ukraine, Russia, and then the US position on that. Taiwan, the situation around Taiwan, China, US, Taiwan, a lot of uncertainty, tension, North Korea, South Korea, Japan. So there is no lack of big tension in the world that creates even more uncertainty.
I think that's a great backdrop. One of the biggest drivers, I would say probably over the last 7 or 8 years, has been the investment into 5G. And Nicholas, obviously Ericsson, a global leader in 5G deployments, equipment, and now even APIs, we can always count on you to get us an update, kind of the state of the nation of 5G, because we do hear different things as we get out here. The glass half full is kind of it kind of feels the same on my smartphone. The glass half full is more along the lines of, we're maybe a third of the way through deployment, arguably half, Industry 4.0, and the opportunity around that. So from your point of view, where are we with 5G?
I'm kind of more the glass half full kind of guy. So let me see if I can get you there.
By the way, we are too, so that's good. Yeah.
But let me see if I can unpack it. So, we have 244 networks live, 5G networks live globally. Still ramping faster than 4G, about 2 years ahead. Billion subscribers, over 1,000 devices. So, if you look at those metrics, there's a lot of momentum in 5G.
Well, the spectral efficiency too. We providers is incredible as well.
Exactly. So the initial business case that everybody talks about is really the production efficiency. 10x better economics producing a gigabyte on a 5G network with 30% lower power efficiency. So why are people hesitant, or why are we not excited about where we are? And it is really, if you start unpacking this, 244 networks sounds massive, but there is only half a dozen countries where you actually have reached somewhere near nationwide coverage with 5G in the mid-band spectrum or better. That's where you get these significant improvements to customer experience. Half a dozen, that's not a bunch. In those countries, you will see some excitement. Subscribers migrating to the higher end plans. Front-runner customers show somewhere between 2 to 5% better top-line growth. But there is very few of them, because most countries, most operators have built out less than 50% of the network. So you really are not offering a differentiated experience. You may have a 5G logo on the phone, but it's not this differentiated experience. So that's part of the problem. Now, where we do see great progress, in particular in the US, of course, is in fixed wireless, which is a net new business for our customers. 5 million subscribers, all customers now behind it, pushing it hard. That is an interesting proposition in emerging markets, but also in the US. So that is something to be excited about, I would say. And India now, with Jio launching 5G, has committed to 100 million fixed wireless subscribers. That will drive an incredible ecosystem, and I'll come back to that, which is really important, which in turn will spark even more investments, I think, in fixed wireless. And then I think the big disappointment is probably in the enterprise category. So we've been talking a lot about enterprise, smart factories. We were in Louisville last year, a public sector transformation. That digital transformation has not yet happened. We have hundreds of proof of concepts, POCs in factories. We can be honest, in our factory, you saw one of the AGVs with duct tape strapped to it and the modem. That's because the device ecosystem is not there. So the industrialization hasn't happened. I think we have plenty of reason for optimism. That's why I say the glass is half empty. We know that there is real value in it for industries. You saw it in the factory. We have a very recent large car manufacturer that we have brought 5G into their factory. They see 2x productivity improvement in their factory. A lot less wiring, so less tripping hazards. So they definitely can write home about the triple bottom line impact, but it does not scale yet. So I think we're at the cusp of, call it exponential innovation, but we need to figure out the industrialization part, and we can talk more about that.
Yeah, and I think the monetization is a big question as well. I think you pointed out, the experience part is a little bit tricky for the consumer. Everyone that's using a device, you get a 5G signal, and you're seeing, why is this not
by country
right?
Too,
and why is this not better?
Some countries build out 4G LTE Advanced so well that, in that initial 5G that came out, right?
Yeah, and it's saying why, and sometimes you're like, even is it better? And that's a big question mark. I think that you're gonna have to continue to drive people to say this is really better. Now, on the enterprise side, though, I am really interested in talking about what's the problem there. Like, why? Because I think this is something we've had conversations for at least a few years now. Everyone's like, oh, the monetization is either lacking or it's slow to catch up. And I'm guessing, Pat and Nicholas, that if it is slow to catch up, that also slows the investment. Why rush to get our systems up if we're not able to quickly monetize them? So it's a kind of a, tail wagging the dog thing. What are you seeing there in terms of the driving monetization, especially in the enterprise?
That's my concern, that we end up in this period where, what happened, right? And if you take a step back and you look at where we are, we're probably exactly where we should have expected to be at this point in time. So we've built a great consumer proposition. much better production machine. Improved customer experience, but if we think about the use cases, does it matter that I can download my video in like 10 seconds instead of 15? So in terms of consumer experience, we haven't really transformed much with the 5G innovation platform at this point in time. And that's, so you're absolutely right. The customer experience, which is the key here going forward, is not significantly different. So what needs to happen next is that, because we keep comparing the kind of the 5G network to the 4G network and how much of the 4G network has been overbuilt. That's actually not relevant because we need to build a significantly deeper mobile edge compute platform also to transform consumer experiences. So if you want to take your AR goggles onto a wireless network, that needs to be available to you instantaneously, pervasively across the network. We see that in our private networks because you can build that kind of an experience. But to build that out in the wide area network, you actually need to densify your network. You need a lot more sites, a lot more mobile edge compute nodes to also deliver those experiences persistently to consumers. And in the enterprise segment, for you to depend on your digital transformation and put that on the wireless network, that experience needs to be available, guaranteed, reliable, secure, with high integrity. And that needs a lot more investment in the network platform. So I'm super focused right now to make sure that we don't lose sight of the bigger prize, which is this innovation platform that needs to be built out. We see it in some geographies. Keep an eye on India. 5 months into it, and they are, give them 6 to 12 months. They will have overtaken the US in the pervasive mobile edge compute platform that they will have built out. And the innovation at the ecosystem, the whole digital India transformation that will ride on top of that is going to be something to keep an eye on. Good for us, it drives the ecosystem. Right. But of course, also a stark reminder that this is not about the 5G network, it's about the innovation to happen on top. So we need to continue building out those networks. We need to get the device ecosystem to accelerate. I think we have access to 20-25% of the global devices here. That tells me that the networks here are not as good as elsewhere. We need to get that device ecosystem excited, ignited, and reinvesting. Qualcomm has done some good breakthrough with their lower cost form factor chipsets. And then the bigger part of it, we touched upon it last time we met, is the mobile networks can no longer be treated as a commodity black box. We need to open up these networks now so that developers get access to them in an open, intuitive, and programmable way. And that's why we bought Vonage. That's the whole idea, is about exposing these unique network capabilities to developers so that they can build great services. So we need the devices, we need the developer system plugged in, and then I think we'll get into this phase of exponential innovation. So we're not done. So we're actually probably not more than halfway done building out these network platforms.
Yeah, and I always like to look at the historical perspective of it. If you look at 4G, the big innovation hit at the very end of the cycle, right? The ride sharing, ordering food, social media, right? The big applications and the big platforms that were built off of it. 5G was different, right? I think people learned from, oh my gosh, this was transformative. Let's start talking about and evangelizing it up front, like year one or year two. So I think there was a little bit of a mismatch, and the other way I like to look at 5G is that it is technically 1G, but it's really, let's just, for sake of argument, 3 different types of services, right? Low bandwidth, high latency, and on the other end, low latency, high bandwidth, and then everything in the middle. And the ability, which by the way is a first for all the Gs, is the ability to fractalize the service, where you used to have services that sure, you wrote off fixed costs, but you were riding the same technology that was the same cost. 5G enables to essentially get the type of service that you want, and that takes time. It takes a new back end. It takes things like massive MIMO to be able to put out. So yeah, halfway there, probably did a good job getting the investment cycle going, but I do believe it's going to come through. When it comes to things like Industry 4.0, it's also more than putting in the network. You're actually when you're changing your manufacturing strategy and process, when you're changing your warehouse, when you're changing even moving goods from place to place, that's a pretty heavy lift, right? And that just takes time. The good news, though, like you said, right, you have these lower power, smaller, hence lower cost modems from companies like Qualcomm that would make more sense every mile in a gas pipeline as opposed to previous technologies. And carriers are continuing to build out these networks. So I'm pretty excited.
You should.
So what do you think, though, lies ahead? We kind of, and I want to talk to him about AI. We'll get there. But before we do that, I want to stay on the 5G. We hear people coming out with things like 6G. And Pat, I know it drives you and I crazy. People are talking about 6G before.
I'm not even showing up for a 6G
and I get
briefing.
And I get it. I get that, the companies that are building need to be working on the future.
Yeah.
But, if you listen to everything you just said, it sounds like there's still so much development to go. Have you thought about kind of what the big next opportunity is for 5G, maybe some of the applications? I said to you, we talked about metaverse, you used AR as a little bit of an example, but we also kind of saw that wave. It hit a bit of a wall, I'd say, when the economy got a little slower. People's interest. I still think the factory applications versus the social
twin
are different, but kind of what do you see? Like, what's going to be maybe the forcing function that really does drive that investment and that pace of innovation in 5G?
I think it's, and you made the point, right? This is kind of how I rationalize it. In 4G, the network was actually built out, and then the innovation happened.
Yes.
I think in 5G, we got a little bit ahead of ourselves because everybody saw it it was so obvious. It has to happen. But it can happen without kind of having the basic tenets in place. I mean, if you don't have a network built out that delivers a significantly superior experience that you can kind of bank on, why would anybody innovate on it, right? It will be the same services. Then the device ecosystem. If you cannot come up with devices, chipset, sensors in other form factors so that we don't have to put an iPhone with duct tape on an AGV, but it kind of is built in, and sensors on pretty much everything. Anything that can be connected will be connected in the future. But none of that will matter if developers can access it. If the network is still a black box and treated as best effort, you're not going to get industry to bet their digital transformation on a best effort wireless network. So some of the fundamentals are just not in place. So I think that's why I said the 5G network has all you need from a network perspective to deliver on that vision still. So we need to keep our heads down, focused on building out those network platforms. We actually need to get more spectrum in the US. I mean, there's a huge spectrum shortage in the US. We don't talk enough about that probably. 6G in my mind, I have the same riff. When somebody comes and talks about 6G and you start going back, why? It's because we're a little bit disappointed that the industry transformation didn't happen. Well, that's not going to happen because we start talking about 6G either. We need to get the ecosystem to accelerate, and then 6G, in my mind, our mind, will be a more graceful, gradual evolution. We now have separation of hardware, software, the virtualization. We talk about Cloud Run. So I think it's going to be less dramatic. So let some of us and our research teams worry about what that needs to look like. There's a lot of efforts going on, but we can't afford to get customers, investors, the ecosystem distracted by that. We know what we need to do, and we just need to look at some other front-runner nations that are heads down building out that network compute platform.
I love to hear about this. I mean, it is literally all about the developers. And I love what you're doing with Vonage. I love that at Mobile World Congress, ratification of standards to make, industry standards across different companies. I think that is great because developers don't want to have an option. If they're a global company, they have to write to 10 or 20 different platforms. It is not going to happen. And that's historically not how innovation has really flourished. I would be remiss if I didn't bring up one of the hottest topics out there, and that's generative AI. I think, this is not one of these kind of NFT type of, boom and then boom type of, when you call it a trend, maybe it's more of a fad. But generative AI has really taken off, not only from a consumer point of view. This is the fastest uptake of consumer use in the history of technology. But the funny part is, this is actually, generative AI has been around for 2 or 3 years, right? But it's suddenly got this flurry of interest on the B2C side and also on the B2B side. What is Ericsson's play? What are your thoughts on it moving forward? Fad, trend, business driver?
So first, let's put it into context of what we try to do, which is building this 5G innovation platform. And what's fascinating is multiple concurrent disruptive technology innovations happening in, call it, near technology sectors. So we've talked a little about IoT. We have nanotech, 3D printing, robotics, energy power.
Right.
So all of those are mutually reinforcing if you think about it. Now you add generative AI to the mix, you kind of get line of sight to exponential innovation that we've been talking about. If you start combining some of these disruptive technologies and overlay them and what you can do with them. So we have, 250 data scientists in our global AI center that have been working on this for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So this is not news to us. But if I break it down how we think about it, in the context of what our customers are looking for, a lot of it is about cost. Total cost of ownership is kind of the number one priority for most of our customers. So here you can think about our operating efficiencies. Can we transform our business processes? Can we spend less time on creating reports, on doing research, analysis? Of course, generative AI has an amazing role to play there. But also if you look at R&D, writing code. I mean, we already use it to some extent, and it's proven pretty powerful. And so that's, of course, something we're looking at as well. Another category that's huge for our customers is end customer experience. So we think about network design, network tuning and optimization, and then managing your networks. And across the spectrum, you can see generative AI play a huge role on how you design better networks, how you operate the networks. You can start talking about intent-based networking. So you communicate with your operations center and say, this is the outcome I expect to deliver to a subscriber. Particularly important if you're talking about business transformation in a smart manufacturing or in a public sector setting where you say, I need this SLA enforced for that particular service. And you see, when the sun rises in Tokyo, you see some disturbances in the network we manage in Tokyo. You identify the patterns. You know that there is an intent to manage the SLA in New York against certain parameters. So you will start planning for that. By the time the network storm or whatever it is, the event comes to New York, you're already prepared to deal with it. And then last but not least, new businesses, growth for our customers. So the reason I mentioned all the other concurrent technology disruption happening, you bring generative AI in, mobile edge compute, you will be able to, I mean, we think about bringing the network to where the data and the devices are. Right. That's what the 5G network is supposed to do for you. And generative AI, you cannot render it in a small chip or even an iPhone at this point in time. The models are massive. So you have the big data centers, but mobile edge compute will play a really important role in what you can do with generative AI in certain segments. And that capability you can push out far into the network. And that's where the 5G compute platform will play a huge role.
It'll definitely find its way to those edge devices. And I know that it's being worked on. We know it's being worked on. But, you know, this event, Pat, Nicholas, is really all about kind of that pragmatic innovation during periods of austerity, right? The navigating. And so I like some of the things you said. And, you know, there's a couple of things I'd like to just maybe have you dig into deeper before we wrap up here. And, you know, the first is, you know, the efficiency. Everything I was kind of hearing you say sounds to me like it's about improving the operation of the business, improving, you know, that generative AI or AI itself can help you lower costs, can help you increase productivity, can help you drive higher net promoter, higher customer experience. So those are really practical things in my mind. It's not just generative, it's AI in general. The other thing is, obviously, I know Ericsson has a lot of focus on ESG. And Pat, we've talked endlessly on the 6.5 about ESG needed to find a buoy of pragmatism. meaning, yes, it was great that we were talking about it during the pandemic period, but now we need to say, can we measure it? Can shareholders and stakeholders in the company say that these investments in ESG are actually going to, A, drive more customers to do business with us, B, actually deliver on the promise of, supporting climate change and needs and policy. So putting that all together, is that sort of where companies should start? Is it starting with looking at AI and generative AI opportunities, saying, how do we make our business drive more profit, improve customer experience? I mean, it seems like a lot of it's about kind of this fascinating, cool, what's next idea, but it seems like what you're saying is you can do things right now to make your business better.
Absolutely. I mean, starting yesterday. No excuses. So, I mean, we've been using AI, machine learning already today to do some of the things I talked about. Generative AI will help us accelerate, go deeper, faster on some of those. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the whole optimization, we think of supply chains, huge CO2 footprint. The factory in Louisville, Texas, enabled by digital twins and AI, 24% better energy efficiency than a comparative non-5G site. So absolutely, we see it across sectors. I think that is where the digital transformation of industries, a big part of that is going to be climate action. We look at our industry together with our customers. We represent no more than 1.4% of global CO2 emissions. But we have been talking for the last 5 years about the opportunity to transform industries around us and the potential to impact up to 15 in the US, up to 20% of CO2 emissions in other industries. That's where generative AI, I think, is going to come in and play a really big role. How do we get there faster? How do we optimize and create more efficiencies that will have a huge CO2 impact?
Yeah, it'd be an opportunity just to kind of get everything back on the rails. These systems are smart. I know you and I did an interview not too long ago where they talked about, one particular device knowing it didn't need to be on at any given moment in time and just not being powered up depending on network utilization at any given moment. No way a human could do that. That's something that the machine is going to be incredible at, and I think it will make a really big difference.
And anticipate. So this is about predictive maintenance. This is about predictive sleep mode. So at certain times you can start shutting down part of the network, the cell.
Yeah. Nicholas, it's been so fun having you back here for day one to open up the 6.5 Summit. We really appreciate you. We appreciate Ericsson being part of this event. Going out there and putting yourself on the record, talking about what you see in the future. I think many people can learn a lot from this. And of course, we are in that moment. So really also appreciate you kind of giving that practical advice to our audience. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
All right, everybody, stay tuned. We have more here from day one at the 6.5 Summit. We appreciate you tuning in.